Welcome aboard to the 2019 Volkswagen Tiguan SE with 4Motion all-wheel drive. A great crossover at a great price. But before we get started, I would love to give a massive shout out to Findlay Volkswagen for allowing me to come and check out this 2019 Volkswagen Tiguan. Now, I have always appreciated the way that these Mark II Tiguans look on the outside. They got these really bold lines on the exterior, and I like the way the window trim wraps around. It's got this nice chrome too. Even though the Tiguan has LED daytime running lights, we still get halogen low beams, high beams, and turn signals, but the taillights are full LED, which is awesome to see. Although, I do wish the turn signal wasn't combined with the brake light. Now, since this is of course a used car, it does have a couple little dents and scrapes. It's got a pretty big one on the front, but that can be pretty easily fixed. And it's got this tiny little one on the driver's side, but none of it is really a big deal. Another thing I like is these door-mounted mirrors with LED turn signals and blind spot indicators, which at this price point is pretty advanced, especially for 2019. And one thing that really surprised me is that we have keyless entry on the SE. A feature that you have to pay extra on BMWs. You also get some nice 17-inch wheels on this. It gives you some good rubber, but the wheels themselves also look pretty good, although not as good as the ones you get on the R line. The rear of the vehicle is pretty minimalist. It's very nice. It's got this one little line, and it's got the Volkswagen badge right in the middle. Now, one thing I don't like about the back of the Tiguan is that we have these fake exhaust pipes, which is so silly, because literally the exhaust is right there. Like, they could have just put it right out of the exhaust pipe. Like, it makes no sense why they did that, but oh well, it's just a Tiguan. It's not like it's a GTI or anything like that. We unfortunately don't get a power liftgate on this model, but the regular hydraulic one is perfectly fine because it'll hold itself open on a hill. The one downside to having a manual liftgate is that when you press and hold the trunk button on the key fob, all it does is unlock it. It doesn't even pop or release it like it does on a sedan. Overall, with this beautiful dark green metallic, it gives it kind of sort of a rugged look, and it's very good for a wintry climate like we're in today. But let's take a look at the interior, because the interior is actually really nice, and this is one of the reasons why I like the pre-facelift more than the facelift. Let's start immediately with the steering wheel, because it's the first thing you're going to notice. It's nice and flat bottomed. It's very nice leather wrapped. It's got all the buttons you could possibly need. They're all within reach. You don't have to extend your thumb too much. The right side steering wheel controls control your semi-digital gauge cluster. I like that we still get fully physical dials on the sides with a tach and an oil temp gauge on the left and a speedo and fuel gauge on the right. Everything's analog, so it's very easy to read, and it's not like you have to page through 15 menus like you do on the new one. But in the middle, you can see so much different information. Like right now I have it on my miles per hour screen. That's probably what you guys are gonna have it set to as well. But if we use these up and down and left and right buttons, you can just see so much information. It's almost overwhelming. You can even see an exact readout for your oil temp, which is honestly more than you could possibly need. But a feature I like is you can see your miles to empty and your miles per gallon. On the left side of the steering wheel is all of your cruise controls. This little button down here allows you to enable and disable 3 different safety systems, including blind spot indicator, rear cross traffic alert, and front assist too, although the front assist will always turn itself back on every time you start the car, so that's the auto braking feature. And on the bottom of each side, you have volume controls and back and next controls. So it's a very well laid out steering wheel. The turn signal stalks also feel great, even a little bit better than some older VWs, and so do the wiper stalks, even with the intermittent switch. And if you want to actuate the rear wiper, all you do is just press this back once and you're all set. The steering wheel itself is also fully tilting and telescoping. There's actually a lot of range in this particular one, giving you lots of room to get comfortable. And I really like the hexagonal design. I like how angled the air vents are. I like the little trim, although I wish it wasn't as glossy because it can attract fingerprints really, really well. The dashboard is nice and soft touch, and so are the door panels, which lead me on to that. We got a nice solid feeling grab handle, one touch down and up for all the windows, mirror adjustments, heated mirrors, and down here we do get a little bit of harder plastics, but we have a nice felt lining down here. You have fully automatic headlights, a nice little storage box, which is big enough to hold an iPod Nano in my personal opinion. But the true star of the show is this center 8-inch screen with wired only Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. If you do get one of the newer Tiguans, they do come with wireless on the SEs, but this one is perfectly fine for what it is. It's actually pretty configurable and very fluid to use, and it's the perfect size for a vehicle like this. Plus, it's right within your vision, making it very easy to see what's on the screen while you are driving. There's radio, there's your media, CarPlay. You can even display images, which is very interesting if you plug in a thumb drive or perhaps an SD card in the glove box. And here is also where you change all of your vehicle settings. You can hit this little settings button and you can just personalize the living daylights out of this vehicle. You can even change the units from miles to kilometers. If you go into Canada or Mexico, for example, it's incredibly configurable. You can also configure your coming home lights and arriving lights, since again, we have auto headlights. It's also really easy to configure your sound. It's just one little shortcut right off the main screen, or you can just use the shortcut button on the side. I do wish that the buttons on the side were physical buttons, but it's really not a big deal, and they look pretty nice too. Another interesting feature is that even though we do have fully physical climate controls, you can actually control the climate controls through the screen if you want to, although you don't get nearly as many configurable settings. It's really just the temperature. And then on the last screen is just the settings screen living all on its own. Now, the settings screen is actually different from the vehicle settings because this allows you to configure more head unit specific things as opposed to the car related things. So overall, it's a very easy to use head unit. Let's look at the rear view camera for a second. The rear view camera is honestly a pretty poor resolution for this, but it's honestly not terrible given that this car is already a few years old. Now just beneath that, we have my favorite thing about the pre-facelift Tiguan, fully physical climate controls. And in fact, you can still get these on the new Jetta and the new Taos. But it's very easy to jump from low to high on those autumn days where it's freezing in the morning and super hot in the afternoon. Don't ask me how that works, but it's very easy to adjust and incredibly responsive. We also have heated seats, and yes, we get physical buttons for heated seats. Take notes, VW, especially on your newer vehicles and future Tiguans, I might add. Just beneath that, we have a perfect spot to put your phone. It's not wirelessly charging at this price point, but if you got like the SEL Premium, you could totally get that. There are two USB-A ports, a little aux jack, 12-volt socket, and right here is your shifter for your 8-speed automatic transmission with manual shift mode and sport modes. And just next to that is your electromechanical finger brake. Yes, I know, I wish we had a regular handbrake considering there's plenty of room to do so. But just next to that, we have my favorite button, the button to disable the start-stop system. We're gonna leave that on for the rest of the video. Down here is a rotary dial for various driving modes. Since this is a 4-motion vehicle, you get snow mode, regular driving modes, off-road mode with hill descent control, and off-road custom, which I haven't really messed with that much, but it's incredibly configurable. But my favorite is just putting it in the normal drive mode, setting it to custom. By the way, we have eco, normal, and sport as well, and just setting the steering to sport, giving the steering a lot more feel. I want to talk about that for a brief second. When you have the steering in normal, it's honestly pretty light. It's electric power steering, so you're not going to have nearly as much steering feel, but little hack, put it into sport mode and it'll drive a lot more like a vehicle with hydraulic power steering. It actually feels pretty nice in this vehicle and I could get used to it myself. Working our way further down the center console, we have the perfect placement for cup holders plus the perfect spot to put your key fob. And we have a center armrest right here with some nice padding. However, there is no latch, a very interesting way to cost cut. And I like how they give you a little groove here. So if you want to run cables out of here, that's pretty nice. However, not very helpful since we don't have any kind of power in here. It's quite a big center console, but there is nothing going on in there. The seats themselves are relatively comfortable. The passenger seat is manual, but the driver's seat is fully power. We have two different tiers of height adjustment. They go back and forth, recline, and we even have two-way lumbar, allowing you to get very comfortable. And I feel like I could just cruise and cruise in this Tiguan on a long drive. And right here is your glove box. It's actually quite big. It actually has a CD player, an SD card slot, and quite a bit of space, even though unfortunately it's not lockable. But a little cost-cutting thing that won't matter to most people. Working our way up, we have our sun visors with little halogen convenience lights. And in fact, this is actually pulled straight out of my car. They're also fully extendable too, which is very important. And of course, we have the all-important sunglass holder. It's actually quite huge. But let's say someone's already put sunglasses in this giant sunglass holder. Well, you actually have a little shelf up here that you can put your sunglasses in too, but be careful because they will roast in the sun. And there's even halogen dome lights here too, plus all your other lighting controls here. And lastly, we have an auto-dimming compass mirror with HomeLink. So the first thing I immediately noticed when I got back here is the fact that we have these really slippery all-weather mats. Like I can literally just slide my shoes on them, but I digress. Back here, we have so much space. It's honestly incredible. Since this is the 5-seat version, the seats don't slide, but we have loads of legroom and absolutely gargantuan loads of headroom. Someone over 6 feet is going to be so comfortable back here. And don't think I'm faking this either. This seat is in my default driving position. So if the person in front is 6 feet tall, they themselves could slide the seat all the way back and I would still have a ton of legroom back here. And this is actually pretty incredible because this is the long wheelbase Tiguan in Europe. In Europe, they actually get a shorter wheelbase Tiguan, which shrinks the back doors a little bit. It makes the back seats a little more of a normal size. So not all Tiguans are created equal, but all of the Mexican-built ones that are sold in the States are all the all-space model, which has all of this space, as you can tell, even though we don't call it the all-space. There's also driver and passenger side seat pockets, which is something that a lot of automakers, especially VW, have been cheapening out on as of late. There's also your very own air vents, even though you don't have your own zone. That's perfectly fine. There's a little pocket here. I'm not really sure what you could put there. Maybe a roll of Mentos or something. There's a USB-A port back here and a little 12-volt socket. And to the door panels, you'll immediately notice that back here, they cheaped out just a little bit. Instead of the soft touch, there's this hard plastic on top. Even though the armrest and this little area are nice and padded, the grab handle still feels great. Back down here is back to the same hard plastic, but you do have the felt lining back here still. I'm glad they didn't cheap out on that because it does reduce rattles quite a bit. Now, once you're looking up at the light colored headliner, the only thing you have up here is just your grab handles and your driver and passenger side dome lights. I do like that you get 2 separate ones though. There's also this center armrest, which has 3 different cup holder sizes like in most VWs. It's got some nice padding to it, so I could see myself just sitting back here and easily enjoying a several hour long trip too. But not only do we have a center armrest, if we push this little button here, we can actually fold this down to serve as a center pass-through to the rear area, effectively creating 2 captain's chairs. Another thing that really helps with that is if I pull this little strap here on both sides, I can fully recline the seat. This is its most upright position, but if I pull this, I can go back a little bit further, much like in a Toyota RAV4, even though I think the Toyota RAV4 has a little more reclining, but not nearly as much legroom as the Tiguan. This is the king when it comes to legroom in its class, easily. But what is the middle seat comfort like? If I move to the middle, we have this decent transmission tunnel. It's not terrible since we have a taller vehicle, but it does send my feet to the outer 2 floorboard areas. And best of all, it doesn't feel like I am sitting in a hump seat. There's actually a little bit of a sinkage in between the 2, and I still have decent headroom. So I feel like I could ride in the middle seat of this Tiguan for maybe an hour car ride, which is pretty impressive given that this takes up the same footprint on the road as a Volkswagen Jetta, which doesn't have nearly as much middle seat comfort. But we can fold these seats and gain access to the rear trunk area, which can be accessed by pulling a little tab next to the rear view camera. And once we're back here, you can see there's actually quite a bit of space. Unfortunately, these seats don't slide like in the 7-seater model, but since we don't have those extra 2 rows, we have quite a bit more room under here, as I'll show you in a second. We have these nice little tethering points here, and there's a little pocket here with even more tethering points. There's this little shortcut to fold the seats. If I pull that tab like so, you can see that it just magically folds for you, which is nice. Do the same with the other side, and it yields you a lot more room. I just gotta finish folding this seat by pushing it even further down, but I can correct it with some movie magic. And what's really neat about these is they actually snap into place, meaning that these seats will stay as flat as they can be for as long as you need to use them for, effectively turning the back of your Tiguan into a van. But it gets crazier than that because we can lift our cargo protection system here. We have a nice big false floor, and that's what this handle is for. We can get access to a space saver spare wheel, plus our jack and various other components. But what's really cool about this false floor is if I try to do this with one hand, I can actually fully move it out of the way, and we can create another layer of false floor, as you can see right here, so we can gain even more access in the back of our Tiguan, all the way down to the floorboard if we need to. You can even go as far as removing this whole thing, although obviously I don't recommend that. If you need to carry a bunch of stuff back here, you can truly do that in this Tiguan. But let's go ahead, put everything back off camera, and I'll show you guys What the Volkswagen Tiguan is like to drive. Alrighty, now it is time to talk about the driving impressions of this 2019 Volkswagen Tiguan. What do I think of it? Well, it's got the 2-liter turbocharged inline-4. It's derived from the EA888 Gen 3, which is a legendary turbo 4-cylinder from Volkswagen. It's got about 184 horsepower, and of course it's made it to an 8-speed automatic. So it's actually pretty responsive, but it's not the quickest thing in the world. You'll find yourself getting around 4,000 RPM trying to do a quick acceleration to get on the highway. I believe the 0 to 60 time was about in the 7-second range on this vehicle, so it's not the quickest thing in the world, but you don't really need it to be quick because it's also incredibly fuel efficient too, which means you can drive quite a bit of miles between fuel stops, especially on a road trip, which this thing is pretty much built to do. It's meant to get your family around while also being pretty fun to drive. Speaking of which, the steering feel is actually pretty good. I actually have it in sport right now, so it tightens up the steering just a little bit, but it is electric power steering, so it's a little bit light. You can see I'm steering it with just one finger, but I actually prefer this in low speed maneuvers. But you can see we're gonna go from lock to lock here. It's pretty good, and the turning radius is pretty great too. The Tiguan also has disc brakes, so they have a pretty good feel to them themselves. Now, unfortunately, we do have a top-mounted pedal, but I actually think the top-mounted pedal makes it a little bit easier to get the power down. The 8-speed automatic is also incredibly smooth too. It's very nice on the highway. Road noise is actually not terrible in the Tiguan. Even though it's a taller vehicle, we have the door-mounted mirrors eliminating a little bit of wind whistle. Even though it wasn't too windy today when I was out driving, it was almost whisper quiet. The suspension, however, is a little stiff. It does make it a little bit more fun to drive, but when driving over potholes, you will almost certainly feel it. We do have multi-link rear suspension in the back though, unlike the Mark 7 Jetta, which is pretty nice to see. And honestly, for 47,000 miles on this EA888, it drives great. It seems that it's been pretty well maintained, and it drives just like one of these does brand new. I've driven a couple new Tiguans, and this is the first used one I've driven, and they're pretty much indistinguishable driving-wise. So it's overall a very enjoyable driving experience. The Tiguan also handles pretty well too. I was going into a corner and there's a little bit of body roll, but again, we have some decently stiff suspension on this. So it actually has a little bit of a sporty driving dynamic, even though it is a crossover. I think it is more fun to drive than both a Toyota RAV4 and a Honda CR-V combined. And so with that in mind, whether you're looking at this beautiful used pre-facelift 2019 Tiguan with better controls and better color choices, or if you're looking at a brand new Tiguan with better lighting technology, I highly recommend the Volkswagen Tiguan Mark II as your next compact crossover vehicle. However, don't expect to be using the third row for anything if you option yours with the third row. So thank you so much for watching my review of the 2019 Volkswagen Tiguan SE. I hope you guys check one of these out for yourselves, and I hope you guys check out Findlay Volkswagen because they have a pretty decent inventory of not only used Tiguans, but new Tiguans as well. And so that's about it from me. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next one, and of course, drive safe.